It's not often that I'm very happy about being wrong. For those who don't know, I had a video well before this recent season of House of the Dragon talking all about Hugh Hammer. He's one of my favorite characters from the books. I think he's quite interesting in just his role in the story, and he's got a lot of potential. The book really didn't realize that I'm glad the show seems to be running with. In that video, I make the assertion that he might be the bastard son of King Viserys the First Targaryen. As of Season 2, Episode 7 of House of the Dragon, I am completely and totally wrong on that point. We learn pretty much exactly who Hugh's Targaryen parent is in this episode, and it has a number of really fascinating implications for both him as a character and his claiming of Vermithor, as Vermithor is the former dragon of King Jaehaerys the First Targaryen, and King Jaehaerys is Hugh's grandfather and had a very tumultuous relationship with the woman we now believe to be his mother. Today, I'm going to discuss those relationships and what I think it means for Hugh and his future in House of the Dragon. Hugh Hammer begins talking about his backstory with his wife Kat, if I'm using D&D lingo. He begins by saying that he grew up in a pleasure house. This is notable as oftentimes this sort of establishment is called a brothel in Westeros. A pleasure house makes one specifically think of Lys, which is important for this story later on. Specifically, we hear that his mother worked there as a prostitute and was granted more freedom than most because she was a woman with silver hair and lords tended to pay more to be with her. This is very notable as we seem to learn that she is a Targaryen princess. She specifically says to Hugh that he is no different than her brother's boys, Viserys and Daemon. This places her as one of the many, many children of Jaehaerys and Alysanne. I honestly didn't pick up on who exactly this might be. Like when I was watching this episode for the first time, I thought, oh, it must be a bastard of Jaehaerys or something. But no, this fits in super well with one character we already know quite well from Fire and Blood, but who we lose track of in the historical record, that being Saera Targaryen. I do want to ask, we're staring down the barrel of the end of House of the Dragon Season 2. What's your opinion on it so far? I really have a lot of interesting thoughts. I think it's mostly positive. There are some issues with it. Be sure to leave a comment. Let me know your thoughts. While you're down there, leave a like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. It's free and it helps grow the channel. I know, you're surprised. You thought I was going to say he was descended from Ariana Targaryen. No, Saera Targaryen is one of the kids of Jaehaerys the First. There are 13 of them in total. She's somewhere later on in those, and she's noted to be a very defiant child. She is very much just wanting to get her way at all times. Her first word is no, and she is prone to playing all sorts of pranks. It's said that she's as clever as her brother Vagon, who goes on to be a maester in her own way, and she just has some fun at the expense of others most often. She is very, very mean to the court fool Tom Turnip, which is quite unfortunate, but some of her pranks are generally funnier. She fills her sister's chamber pot with bees, and my favorite is that she dyes all of the white cloaks of the Kingsguard pink, which is just pretty fun overall. But as Saera grows up, this kind of wild child energy slowly morphs into a more solidified, rebellious streak that is both not great for herself and not great for those around her. She's noted as stealing a fair bit of food from the kitchens. Later, that food turns to alcohol, and she ends up showing up to Sept drunk most of the time when she's 12, which, we were all kids once. We've all been there. This begins to turn sour later on in Sarah's life, and by later on I mean when she's like 15 as opposed to when she was like 12. This also involves the fool Tom Turnip. Two members of the City Watch had to essentially rescue him from a brothel in King's Landing, where he had seemingly gotten and had really no idea where he was. This leads to a string of questioning where the knights who were involved are questioned. This leads to some of Sarah's handmaidens being questioned, and then Saera herself is brought before her father in the Iron Throne. It is found that one of her handmaidens is pregnant, and that all three of them, the two handmaids and Saera herself, had been quote unquote practice kissing, I assume among other things, with these three young lords. One of whom is a Connington, I should mention, another of whom is a Beesbury, who's also pretty cool, but I mean, Connington mentioned, Conningtons can be straight, it's big news. But with that said, Saera then is kind of demanded by her father to tell him which one of these men she gave her maidenhead to, and after being very defiant and circling through a million excuses for quite a while, She eventually says that she gave it to all three of them, comparing herself first to King Aegon the Conqueror, and then the main thing that causes her dad to blow up at her, comparing herself to Jaehaerys's uncle Maegor. Maegor had usurped the throne from his father Aerys, and not from Maegor's father Aerys, from Jaehaerys's father Aerys, and it's not Aerys, it's Aenys. I'm a fool. But regardless, Saera, in pushing the Maegor button, gets herself exiled and scandalized from court. However, once she's exiled from court, she goes across the narrow sea. She sets herself up at a pleasure house in Lys, where she lives as essentially the person who runs it. This obviously matches one to one with Hugh's backstory, seeing as he was raised in a pleasure house. He doesn't say he was raised across the narrow sea, nor does he have an accent typical of Essos, but we've seen people like Varys lose their accents in the past, and I think that given that Hugh said he wanted to make his own way in the world, and he appears to be, I'd say, mid 30s ish in age, he definitely could have come over and lost the accent in that time. Saera is an important character, more so than I initially thought. I recently reread or re-listened to, it was the audiobook version, of Fire and Blood, and I did find that Saera's story was particularly impactful, especially for her parents. Her parents really, really fight a lot about this. Alysanne, her mother, continually wants to retrieve Saera from across the narrow sea, welcome her back at court, and allow her to apologize to her father, and allow her father to apologize to her. This is a massive, massive issue for her and her husband, because Jaehaerys is just completely steadfast in not wanting to forgive Saera. He views her as having brought dishonor upon their house, and I think partially at least due to the mention of Maegor, he just cannot approach this idea whatsoever, as the potential of her bringing further dishonor, were she to be allowed back into King's Landing, is just too much for him. However, we know that this lingers with King Jaehaerys in his later years. Alysanne and Jaehaerys' relationship never quite fully recovers from this rift. They reconcile for a while, and then they have another rift after the death of another one of their daughters. But given that fact, it seems as though this was very important to both Alysanne and to their relationship as a whole. And we do have evidence that it was very important to Jaehaerys, and that Jaehaerys himself regretted this decision. Alicent Hightower, when she was very young, was a companion of the old King Jaehaerys. This was before she married Viserys. She would read to Jaehaerys when she was but a child in his bedchamber, and he was a sick, ailing old man. In that time, specifically during his final night on the mortal coil, he continually calls out to her, thinking that she is Saera, calling her the wrong name and mistaking her for his daughter. This has caused people to believe that Alicent is a secret Targaryen. That's dumb. I don't believe that. But I do believe that it signals that deep down, beyond all of his layers of bitterness and kind of this machismo that is allowing him to kind of preventing him from just reconciling with his daughter, there is a core that knows that it was wrong to exile his daughter. He misses her and wishes that both for his sake and his wife's, he could have welcomed her back into his life. This is all quite important because of the dragon that Hugh claims. Hugh claims Vermithor, the dragon of Jaehaerys, the Old King. We know that dragons and their riders have some sort of psychic bond that links them together. It's unclear exactly how deep this bond goes. We can tell that there is some sort of shared feeling and maybe even thought between these creatures, because we see in the first season of House of the Dragon that in the battle at the Stepstones, Daemon gets shot with an arrow, and I believe the kind of collarbone area, and Caraxes is the one to cry out in pain. Additionally, we learned from a behind-the-scenes prop in this season, Season 2, that Daenys the Dreamer, the individual who foretold the doom of Valyria and was responsible for getting the Targaryens over to Dragonstone, was the first rider of Balerion the Black Dread. This makes one think that maybe this vision, the idea that the prophecies could somehow be tied not to the Targaryen themselves, but to the dragon that they are bonded to, as we know that Daenys the Dreamer was a dreamer, obviously. Aegon the Conqueror had his dream. Viserys thinks he has dragon dreams, and he was the last person to bond to Balerion. So it seems as though there is some shared mental link between individuals and their dragons, beyond just some bond of just rider and mount. It is my thought that through Vermithor, Jaehaerys's desire to forgive Saera lives on. What do we see when Hugh claims Vermithor? We see him hiding at first, but then yelling out in defiance to save an innocent life. Defiance is the trait that so constantly defined his mother. Saera was entirely embodied in this Targaryen just fire and defiance we see in so many other characters. Daeron the Young Dragon is one of them, and just so many Targaryens are defined by not fitting in and just having this all consuming passion for things around them that oftentimes results in this outburst. We see Hugh kind of consumed by this brief rage as he yells at Vermithor. He is obviously still reacting to the death of his daughter, who is very sick, and we see that emotion flow from him freely for the first time in this series. It's probably my favorite moment of this most recent episode, and overall, it's just a much better way of yelling at a dragon than Jon Snow did. Vermithor's view on this defiance could have multiple angles. If Jaehaerys's spirit or consciousness somehow lingers there, as though it were the second life of a skin changer, as we see in the prologue of A Dance with Dragons, perhaps Jaehaerys thought of Saera, or even more likely, dragons have in the past been seen to respond to this Targaryen defiance, most notably with Arya Targaryen, one of the riders of Balerion, who is this kind of young child who steals this massive dragon away and then ends up flying off to Valyria on accident. This defiance that so defines many of the members of this house is crucial to Hugh's journey going forward. It got him this dragon, and I think we're likely to see it continually rear its head as the two of them deepen their bond and Hugh embraces his role as a Targaryen, the son of Saera Targaryen. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. I really enjoyed making it. I love talking about Hugh. He's one of my favorite characters in the book, and I really appreciate any support on this video or the channel as a whole. As I said, you can leave a comment. Let me know what you think of House of the Dragon so far. Finale's coming up. I believe it'll probably be the same day that I'm posting this video. It might be the day after. I'm not sure. We will see when this video gets edited. That is a Quinn problem. That is not a you problem. I'll have more videos in the near future, so I hope you'll stick around to catch them. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you for watching.